Good evening. If you'll all join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, we'll get our meeting started. Welcome, everyone. This evening, the Board of Education is honoring an outstanding group of Parkway students and an elementary school. We're also recognizing state sports champions, our newest Blue Ribbon School, and honoring retiring Chesterfield Chief of Police Ray Johnson. First, I'd like to invite Corey Johnson, our Director of Athletics and Activities, to introduce the state sports champions.
Good evening. On behalf of the Board of Education, Dr. Marty and President Mr. Todd, it's an honor and privilege tonight to introduce our fall state champions, and we have quite a few, so it was a great season for us. Tonight we'll be recognizing the members of the Parkway North girls tennis team, the Parkway South boys swim and dive, and the Parkway Central boys swim and dive team. And now for our state champions, if we could, for Parkway North, our head coach, Coach Ron Lefcourt, he's assisted by Isaac Pearlstone, and the two state champions are the state doubles champions, Emily Koo and Yvonne Shannon. If you could please come up. Emily and Yvonne defeated the doubles team from Villa Duchesne in the state finals 2-0. Emily and Yvonne also swept the district and sectional matches leading up to state. They were very impressive. Emily was first team all-conference singles and doubles. Yvonne was Suburban Conference Player of the Year and first team conference doubles. Yvonne will be attending Missouri Baptist College in the fall to play tennis. And I did get an opportunity to see this duo play, and they were very, very, very impressive. So these outstanding ladies, and Coach Lefcourt did an outstanding job. Our next state champion from South High, Carter Crook. And Carter was our 100-meter breaststroke champion in Class 1. He had a state leading time of 49.79. He dominated the field in the state meet. And Connor is actually not here because he is gone with several of our other swimmers swimming in the junior nationals. But again, Connor did a great job, and he's very, very impressive and had a great season. And now for our team state champion, if we could have the Central High boys swim team come up. Tonight, as we honor Central, want to note that Central is the two-time, they are back-to-back state champions. So they have won this 2 years in a row. So that's an impressive, just an impressive feat that is very, very rare in our state, and Central just leads the way. Of our state champions here, we have Peyton Dimick, Hunter Deutschman, Connor Moran, Winston Reese, Zidane Reza, Colton Smith, and Daniel Richmond were present. There we go. Our head coach, Coach Shanoff, could not make it tonight, but his trusted and outstanding assistant, Coach Abigail Vermeer, and Natalie Connor are present. So again, congratulations. And there's a long list of champions for this team at the state meet. It was just an impressive weekend, the 2 days. We really didn't go more than probably 5 minutes without either Central or one of our other Parkway schools having an athlete on the podium. So of our first place medal winners, this group set a Class 1 record in the 200 medley relay of 1 minute 32 seconds. And that relay consisted of Connor, Colton, Daniel, and William. This group also set a school and Class 1 record in the 200-yard freestyle relay. And Connor was on that relay, Tyler, Brody, and William. They followed that up and swept the relays. They also won the 400-yard freestyle relay with Tyler, Brody, Colton, and Daniel. We also had an individual champion in William Jost. He won the 50 freestyle and the 100 freestyle and a new record, overall record. And then we also had a couple of other placers. Brody placed second in the 500 and the 200 freestyle. And then Connor was second in the 300 individual medley. This group is very, very impressive. One of the things I like to note about this group, this team, this entire swim team, along with winning back-to-back state champions, they have a team GPA of 3.38. So they're just outstanding swimmers and outstanding students. Central outscored the competition and the team race by over 100 points. Central scored 328 points. Second place was Parkway West. So West placed second with 186 points, and then South also placed. So 3 of our 4 high schools placed in the top 5. So it was just a very impressive swim weekend for us. In closing, we're very proud of our state champions and all of their accomplishments. But again, we're proud of them for being great leaders in our schools, being great students. Best of luck to all of our seniors. And before we let them go, thank you to all the parents that came tonight. We could not have had this success without you. And just thank you for all your support and everything you do.
Next up, please welcome Dr. Marty to the podium. He's going to recognize our latest National Blue Ribbon School, and he's also going to recognize Chesterfield Police Chief Ray Johnston.
Thank you, President Todd. I'd like to just pass on my congratulations. And Corey, great job. It's wonderful to see these athletes, but your leadership and your wonderful work academically is also to be noticed. So thank you, and also parents, thank you for being here and all your support. Wonderful, wonderful evening of celebration. So Gina Piccini, Dr. Piccini, please join me. So we're very, very proud that this year, Piermont Elementary School was named a National Blue Ribbon School. And I had the pleasure to join Gina and Chris Salt, one of her teachers in Washington, D.C. a couple of weeks ago for the recognition. The recognition is based on the school's overall academic performance or progress in closing the achievement gap among all subgroups. And this is pretty significant. It's not about just the top students, but all subgroups show improvement. And Parkway was one of 8 schools, not districts, but individual schools from Missouri to be recognized. Parkway now has 18 National Blue Ribbon schools. And the Blue Ribbon program goes back to the 1980s, started in the Reagan administration. And again, only 8 schools in Missouri earned the 2023 recognition. we were accompanied by a school from Ladue and an elementary school from Rockwood, so we had the region well represented. So while Wardy schools represent a diverse fabric of American schools, they also share some core elements. National Blue Ribbon School leaders articulate a vision of excellence and hold everyone to high standards. They demonstrate effective and innovative teaching and learning, and they value the support that teachers and staff get through professional learning and professional development. Data from many sources are used to drive instruction, and every student strives for success and excellence. Families, communities, and educators work together towards common goals. I say all this because I think it's important to realize that in our schools, it takes a whole community. And it starts with the principal, and I'm proud of Dr. Piccini, but she has an excellent staff, and she certainly has an excellent community that reinforces the work of getting to this achievement level. So it's my pleasure to let Gina talk a little bit about and brag a little bit about Piermont and her staff and her students and her community. And I'm very, very proud to have accompanied Gina. I was very, very proud to be able to walk across the stage and be recognized by the U.S. Department of Education as a Blue Ribbon School. Dr. Piccini.
Thank you, Dr. Marty. Dr. Marty, board and my phone is not doing what it needs to do. Thank you so much for celebrating this accomplishment with us. I'd like to quickly recognize, like Dr. Marty said, our staff and our community. Something you need to know a little bit about our teachers and staff. Every day, I watch our teachers and staff with the kids, every single day. And every single day, I can attest, it's the same high-level work, day in and day out. I can only describe it as sort of an infectious synergy that our staff has to be the very best that they can be. No matter what barriers come their way, no matter who is in their classroom, they do what they need to do for our students. You might know that Piermont is a very rich culturally and linguistically diverse school, or you might not know that, but we really are. And no matter what comes our way, what language a child speaks, where their home country is, or who they are, they're getting the top. Our teachers stay razor sharp focused on the Parkway mission. They have a strong sense of collaboration and collective responsibility. They're exceptional learners who take on some pretty brave challenges. And you know what I mean. There's a lot of challenges out there. Our parents and community, I want to thank. They support us and love us each and every day. And our parents, well, they kind of treat us like rock stars. It's pretty fun. They come in and they just treat us like rock stars. And that goes a long way with our staff. So they're very, very supportive, and we couldn't do it without them. They support us no matter what. But I'm telling you, our parents, they have some high expectations too. They want us to do well by their students, and our staff rise to that occasion. I also need to thank the people that make this possible, because honestly, the school board, the administration, you all give us the platform to do the work that we're doing. You give us the high-level resources, the strong mission, and what we need, and even sometimes the autonomy to do what we need to do best. And I'm very proud of Piermont and the Parkway School District. Thank you.
Please walk. Congratulations.
Nobody's with me.
While Gina is walking the line here, you see Chris Salt, who is a kindergarten teacher at Piermont. Had the pleasure of spending some time with him, and I think he's referred to as the mayor, right? And so when Gina talks about her staff, I think he is one of the reasons, and among all the staff. But I understand he greets everybody, he gets around the building every morning. That's why he's called the mayor, right? And thank you, Gina. Thanks very much. All right, our final recognition tonight is Chief Ray Johnson. Ray, would you come up and join me, Chief Johnson? I am very proud that Chief Johnson is able to join us tonight. Something that you may not be aware of is Chesterfield was incorporated in 1989 as a official city. And shortly after that, Chief Johnson was selected, Ray was selected as the police chief. So get this, after 35 years, he is the only police chief that the city of Chesterfield has had. And I think that in itself is a wonderful tribute. I think Ray had a history before Chesterfield, but certainly spent 35 years here in the city of Chesterfield. I'm going to let him introduce his, when he has comments, his replacement who's here tonight. I'm glad she was able to join us. Let me just say that we have been so fortunate to have Ray as the police chief from a school district perspective. He has been a wonderful supporter in my time, and I know even before that. For example, Ray, over the years, supported, we no longer have the DARE program, but initially in the 90s, early 2000s, Ray was one of the reasons why the DARE program was set up, and certainly supported that from the police department at Chesterfield. He has been a long supporter of our SRO program, our police in schools. And he serves, the Chesterfield SRO serves Central High, Central Middle, West High School, and West Middle School. When Sandy Hook occurred in 2012, a number of years ago, Ray actually came to us, the district, and said, we want to support our elementary schools as well. So over the last many years, Ray has been able to use his staff to roam the elementary schools, not with a person dedicate to each school, but certainly resources for our elementary schools. And not only that, they also serve the Rockwood School District and private schools as well. Ray has certainly always been a wonderful supporter of Parkway and making sure that we were taken care of at extra events like athletic events and other special events. The department always made security and safety a major part of their work, and its changes over the years, including the cameras and those things, came into existence. Ray met with us and always made sure we were comfortable with the work that his officers were doing. Even when the department faced some fiscal challenges a couple years ago, Ray made sure that his officers were going to do their best job in making sure they're taking care of our school. He's a real gentleman. He's always a professional, a friend of public schools, and it's been such a pleasure to work with him over the years because he always made sure he took care of Parkway, took care of our students, our families, and our staff. So it's my pleasure to welcome Ray to make a few comments, introduce his replacement, and again, let's give Ray a wonderful round for applause for all his work.
Well, thank you, Dr. Marty, and members of the board. Thanks for inviting me here. I'm in good company with all these other students that are being recognized, so I feel very proud to share this with you. But as Dr. Marty alluded to, we've had a great working relationship, we, the Chesterfield Police Department, with the Parkway School District. I'm very proud of that. We've hopefully served you well. It's been an honor for me to have served 35 years with the Chesterfield Police Department, but it's working with other entities such as the school district that made my job so enjoyable over the years. You know, when a family or a company or a corporation for that matter is looking to relocate, one of the first things they look at is what lies ahead for their employees and what are they bringing into that community. And you know, they do look at security and safety of their employees, but way before that and much higher on their list is what is the school district? What are the schools like, and what do they have to offer the children of their employees? So we're proud to share that list with Parkway, but we're down below the schools when it comes to what people are looking for in a community. I think Chesterfield has a great reputation on all of those lines, what people are looking for. But again, the school districts are an important part of our community, and we in the police department are proud to have had an opportunity to work so closely with the school district on all these other programs. So thank you for the recognition here this evening. It sounded like I did a lot. It was, if you spread it out over 35 years, I'm not sure it was enough. But I've enjoyed every moment of it, and thank you for the opportunity to work with the school district. Special thanks to Dr. Marty and the members of the board for this recognition here this evening. Thank you. I do want to Go ahead. Sorry. I do want to add one thing, and that is, although I'm leaving, I can assure you that the relationship between our department, our police department, and the school district will continue. I've been intimately involved in helping select my replacement along with other members of the city government. But certainly one of the requirements, if you will, on my part was that we continue to work with the school districts as we have. And my replacement has been selected. She will be taking over when I leave in mid-January, and she's here this evening, Captain Cheryl Funkhauser. She is the chief in waiting. She has been with the department, and I've worked closely with her for the past 28 years, but she's done a great job. I know she is as committed to continuing the relationship with the school district as myself and the rest of the department has been. So I'm sure you'll look forward to a good working relationship when she takes over. But again, thank you for having me here this evening. Thanks for the recognition, and congratulations to all you guys. Great job. I think you did more than I did. It sounded like it. So, but thank you, and thank you.
Thanks again to all of our parents and students and your families that were here to join us tonight, and Chief Johnson, and our Blue Ribbon School, and all those who are here to support so many in our district. We're now going to take a quick recess, and we'll resume our meeting shortly. Okay, we all set to resume? Let's see, next on our agenda is 7.0, additions, corrections, and/or modifications. Those include 7.01, addendum to agenda item 11.06, approval of personnel items. 7.02, addition of agenda item 11.30, approval of gifts from the public, donation to Central High School. And 7.03, addition of agenda item 11.31, approval of contract automatic entrance gates for grounds and facilities. Next up is public comments. We only have one tonight, and I believe our single speaker tonight is a repeat. So I won't subject you to the long dissertation I sometimes describe. So welcome Darlene Hawk herself. Nice to see you.
Thank you very much. Good evening, Dr. Marty, President Todd, Vice President Hopper, and esteemed board members. My name is Darlene Hawk herself, and I'm a science teacher at West Middle School. Watch out tonight, here comes math. Season's greetings and happy holidays. I'd like to dedicate this to my wife, the Reverend Hawk herself, the math teacher and special school district teacher of the family. I should have had her check my numbers. In 2022, the Trevor Project showed that on average, 28% of LGBTQ youth experience homelessness and housing instability linked to rejection, violence, or fear of rejection or violence, or the use of conversion treatments at home due to their LGBTQ status. Some research suggests up to 8% of the population may be LGBTQ. We are present across various cultures, ethnicities, religions, and races. You can assume we are everywhere, including in the classrooms. The 2022 enrollment in Parkway was 16,997, and we can roughly estimate that about 1,360 Parkway students may be LGBTQ. We can anticipate that of the 1,360 students, 17 to 56%, that is 231 to 680 students, may be experiencing home and housing instability due at least in part to their sexual orientation or gender identity. Whether at home or at school, not every otherwise loving adult has the capacity to look upon LGBTQ youth and hide their discomfort or genuinely share their joy. So I'm advocating for best practices in schools, as reported by GLSEN's School Climate Learning for Justice Guide, and not just for LGBTQ students. GLSEN's 2021 Climate Snapshot of Missouri reports that between 90 and 99% of students hear insults about gender identity and sexual orientation in Missouri schools. Boys should be free to be tender, and girls should be free to assert with bass, and the rest of us should be allowed to do what we need to do in between. How people express their gender and sexual orientation in school are protected First Amendment rights. If we wouldn't object to a heterosexual or cisgender student's behavior regarding names, manner of dress, relationship choices, participation in activities, day-to-day expressions that are otherwise school appropriate, then we should not call out or target the expression of LGBTQ students. Are we preserving the privacy of our students? Are we allowing them to develop and disclose their lives at their own pace? Are we paving a way for them to have the smoothest transition possible into all aspects of school life, academics, sports, clubs, relationships with peers, dances, and graduations? Why do we spotlight LGBTQ children and youth who want a different name used? Why must we report the differences of sexual orientation when a child reports that they are bullied? How dare we medically monitor transgender youth so closely, ignoring health privacy? It's chilling free speech. Thank you for your time and your attention. Happy holidays.
Next up, may I have a motion and a second to approve the agenda for the regular meeting of the Board of Education as scheduled for December 6th, 2023?
So moved. Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Next up, 10.01 is our calendar of meetings. The next regular board meeting will take place on Wednesday, January 17th, 2024, beginning at 7 p.m. here at the Parkway Welcome Center. Next is board and superintendent reports. Start with Matt.
I don't have much. I'll just kind of share a thank you. Since the last board meeting, we've had some long nights here with various workshops and other meetings. And I just want to say thanks to the admin staff, thanks to SAT team, putting in an extra 4 hours after the workday, 5 hours after the workday, being with us, having fun sometimes, not having fun other times. But we do really appreciate it, because you're putting in your long workday and there's a lot going on during the school day, and then having to come afterwards for 4 to 5 hours sometimes and being with us. We do really appreciate it. Thank you.
I want to echo what Matt said. It has been some long meetings since our last board meeting, but again, appreciate everything that happens. I hope everyone had a good Thanksgiving holiday. You know, for me, I know that Parkway's doing something right when after a long holiday, my kids are excited to go back to school. Whether it's to just see their friends, but I think it's generally they're excited to go back to school. So I was extremely excited for them to go back to school as well. And I hope, like I said, I hope everyone enjoyed a good Thanksgiving holiday and also happy holidays coming up. So wonderful.
Yes, Jeffrey. I just wanted to, like some of the guys have done already, call out attention to our board workshop we had the other night. For those of you in the community, particularly those of you watching online who don't know, we have these twice a year. And the one the other night was 5.5 hours long, and there was a delicious buffet. But in addition to that, it's just a lot of folks who clearly, you know, as I sit there and I sort of watch the room, I didn't contribute very much that night, but I listened a lot. And there's just a lot of people very passionate about the craft of teaching and learning and focusing and honing our vision of how best to help the students of the Parkway School District. And coming away from a night like that, you know, it's hard to not feel emboldened about the positive future of Parkway. Yeah.
Thank you. So I would like to echo what Matt said. I do want to also thank our fabulous administrators and staff that do such hard work every day and put in additional time in the evenings, probably more often than not. In the last couple weeks since our last board meeting, a lot has happened. We've had Thanksgiving. I caught a cold. We had our first board workshop of the school year, as my two colleagues before had mentioned. And a lot of topics were discussed at this meeting. And we have a lot of work to do still. We are a great district, but we still have a lot of work to do to make sure that we're keeping the focus on all of our students' success. We want all of our students to leave Parkway ready to succeed in the world, whatever world might exist by the time they leave. We want them to be successful. And I know we have a lot of great people that are working towards doing that, and I'm grateful for that. December 2nd, I also, along with Mrs. Hopper and Dr. Marty, attended the School Board PLC Professional Learning Community, where we get together with a lot of the school boards in our region, and we talk about a variety of topics that are similar to each of our districts. A couple of things that stood out for me that meeting was along social emotional learning and the need for this to be like the basis of everything that our students are learned from. If a student is hurting physically, mentally, emotionally, they are not capable of learning. And we need to make sure that we understand that that foundation is there so that our students can be successful. That's all I have. Thank you.
I don't know what they were talking about. Those 5.5 hours just flew by. But I do want to thank Nikki. That was the best, Rob mentioned the buffet, the best food we've had at any Parkway event so far. So well done. Thank you. Other than the Charwells, which is also wonderful. So the two questions you get asked as a school board member the most are, why are you doing this? And what's the worst part of it? And I'm up for re-election, so I need to come up with a better answer for the first question. But the second question, it's a very easy answer. The hardest part of this job is the disciplinary hearings, which I think someone mentioned earlier. Just because, we're deciding, issues of discipline for students and, things that can shape their lives, and it's a responsibility that we all take very, very seriously. But the reason I bring this up, though, is because I think it kind of showcased what I think my answer is to the first question. We had a hearing last week, and we've had a few of them over the years, and they're very tough nights. But I'm very proud to be part of a board that even in those environments, those difficult, when we're making difficult decisions, we work together to try to, as best we can, still trying to help kids, even at, the kind of the lowest moment of their academic careers. And, it's not just about the board, but I think that's just the climate of the school district is, Sam Sorrentino always talked about, how is what we're doing good for kids? And it's something that this board, it's a question we ask when we're making any decision, and I think that echoes out through the whole district. And I'm very proud to be a part of a district and a board that puts kids first.
Well, I'll echo my thanks as well to the administration, in addition to that very lengthy board workshop, which takes a lot of preparation to begin with. And then trying to come up with the ideas and the topics as to what we should really delve deeply into, because on a board night, we just don't have that much time. But in addition to that, some of us also attended on Tuesday night the Project Parkway Steering Committee meeting, and Dr. Beckner and Dr. Beth Holman are leading the charge with that and facilitating that. And I know a number of our administrators had attended that meeting as well, including Dr. Marty. So that was a wonderful opportunity to get to hear the results of all of the focus group meetings that we have been having for the past several months. Focus groups have taken place with students, staff, our community members, board members, a variety of different advisory committees that we have within Parkway to come up with where are we headed with our school district and where do we want to be. And we'll hear tonight from Dr. Beckner, I believe, on our Vision for a Learner, and Dr. Beth Holman as well, which has been generated out of the work from Project Parkway as well, so that we're continuing to stay on the edge of being a very innovative district, so that we can do, again, what is best for all of our students. Then with that, on Wednesday night, I also, in my capacity in serving on the Special School District's Governing Council, I serve on a subcommittee to evaluate the process for electing the Special School District Board of Education directors. That process is starting as all of the candidates for school boards are starting to, their first filing date was yesterday, I believe, December 5th, and it will run through December 26th. The difference with Special School District is that the Governing Council is the only body that elects the Board of Education directors to the Special School District, and that's done through an application process and then through a personal interview process. And so I have felt that it's been very important that we need to be more robust in that process. The last time we reviewed the process was in 2018, and we wanted to make some changes to make some things very clear with the direction of where we want to go with that election of board members. We currently have 2 seats that will be open for the March 2024 election to the SSD Board of Education. So if you know of any individuals in any of these areas, please encourage them to go to the SSD office to pick up an application packet. We have Subdistrict 5. The incumbent currently is Dr. Meredith Byers. And Subdistrict 5 includes the school districts of Brentwood, Kirkwood, Lindbergh, Valley Park, and Webster Groves. So that board member on SSD would be representing all those school districts. And then in Subdistrict 6, our incumbent is Ms. Tiffany Hudson, and that includes school districts of Ladue, Normandy, Rittner, and University City. So we look forward to that process and hope that we can continue to make it a better process than it's been in the past. And then we had the board workshop, and then on Friday, I also attended a government relations meeting. And prior to that, in that morning, I did attend a legislative advocacy Zoom webinar that was conducted by our St. Louis County Board PLC group. And so I think the big message here is December 1st was the first date for pre-filing bills, that legislators could file bills, and that we really need to keep an eye on the various different bills that are going to be filed and that will be talked about in the next legislative session. Particularly those related to education. We're learning that legislators really want to hear from students and parents. They just assume that they will hear from people like board members and teachers, but they really want to hear from students particularly and parents. So encourage your students, encourage your parents to get out there, stay on top of this, and I will commit to trying to make a better effort to communicating what some of the key issues are that in our board subcommittee reports as to what some of the legislation is that we really need to keep an eye on. And then Saturday morning, of course, as Ms. Matt Franklin already talked about, was the St. Louis County Board PLC event, which was pretty well attended for a Saturday morning on a cold December day. But some of the focus groups, we had a legislative advocacy session with a case study. The focus groups that we broke out into are social emotional learning, career and college readiness, student voice and empowerment, early childhood education, equity, and legislative advocacy. I went to the student voice and empowerment. I had intended to walk around and go to all of them, but once I got into that one, I was just so overwhelmed by these kiddos, and it gave me a new hope that, wow, we've got some spectacular young people out there who are going to be leading the charge, and they are worth listening to. So we welcome those opportunities to increase our opportunities to meet more with our students within the Parkway School District as well. And then the Special School District Governing Council meeting I attended on December the 4th, we received an update on year 2 of their 5-year comprehensive school improvement plan, as well as an update on the budget and their process with that, which is budgets now those processes have begun underway in school districts. So we'll be hearing about some of that tonight for Parkway as well. And then we did review the revisions made to the process for going through the Special School District Board of Education Director interview and application process, and the Governing Council did approve those changes. So we were pleased we can move forward with that.
Thank you. I will be brief, since some of the things I was going to mention have already been mentioned, but I'll add my own thanks to administrators and directors and all the people that worked with us on our board workshop. We do really appreciate your time, especially in those late nights. And only other thing I'll add is that Tiffany, I got to participate in the Progress 64 lunch that happens every fall. This year's theme was Champions in Action, and they honor people who have achieved great things, not just in the region, but not necessarily professionals, but also some students. So this year, they handed out 4 scholarships, over $20,000, and half of those scholarships, two students were from Parkway. So great to see everything going on. And I think it's been almost every year we've had at least one. So this year we had 2 students that were recognized. So great to see.
Thank you. I would be remiss if I didn't pass on the administrations. Thank you. Those some nice compliments, but please know we also appreciate all the time you put in and the big paycheck you get as a result of all that time. But no, we really do appreciate the relationship we have with the board and your willingness to put in all that time as well. In the last month, I had the pleasure of attending the Missouri Hall of Fame a couple of Sundays ago. And the reason I went is Dr. Tom Smith, who's a Parkway alum and is president of our Alumni Association, was inducted into the Missouri Hall of Fame. You might say, well, how did he achieve that? Well, he was a longtime athletic director at Missouri Baptist and very successful and really grew that athletic program. So I and a number of the Alumni Association members had that pleasure. And it was particularly interesting. They had 25 recognitions, and the last one was Mr. Wainwright from the Cardinals. And so they had a number of people that had achieved wonderful things in Missouri athletic history. So it was a wonderful, wonderful day. Congratulations to Dr. Smith, who, by the way, is doing a wonderful job in that role. I also had a pleasure last week. So we were pretty active in Parkway and Junior Achievement. Almost every one of our students get a chance to go to BizTown in their 5th grade. And then we also do oftentimes business people coming into classrooms. Well, last week I just happened to be at Barrett's, and get this, 70 volunteers, many of them parents, were at Barrett's for what we call JA in a day. Now, I'm on the JA board, and we try to really think differently because it's hard to get people to come over different times. So the JA in a day is where you spend a whole day with various volunteers talking about economics and finance and various activities. Had 70 volunteers at Barrett's. What a wonderful salute to that community, and it was a wonderful to get in and out of classrooms and see those activities. That was last week. Also, just want to indicate that this is a little bit down the road, but on February 4th, we'll have our summer expo for community education. That's going to be at West High School, so circle that date. Mike Seppi and his staff put together a wonderful program, and we really like our community to get out because there's so many. There's about over 100 people who show up and talk about the things that are offered in the area for students in the summer. We have a new commissioner in the state of Missouri, and you probably have seen that, Senator Carla Essinger, who is from Southwest Missouri, former superintendent, former employee at DESE, the department, and for the last several years, since about 2015, been in the legislature, both in the House and now in the Senate. She will take over from Margie Van Even in June, so she's going to finish her term as a senator. I've had the opportunity to spend some time with her, both in terms of being in Jefferson City, but also some orientation I got involved in last year with new legislators. And then she actually sponsored a bill to get some funding for character education. So we invited her in last year and had a wonderful relationship with her. So I think it's a good choice, personally, and somebody who certainly knows public education, very supportive, and we're looking forward to working with her. You'll notice in this room some new signage. Do you all notice that? We have continually work going on. Pat Gutting and from our operations staff has been working. You may remember we kicked off Highcroft last year, but they've accelerated this work, and so most of our schools now are going to have and will have soon completed signage, both on the outside and inside. So, Jeff said it's kind of, he's noticed it certainly, but the reason for this is for security and for both police and fire. So you'll see this continually show up in our schools. I think I've covered most of the things, and I know we want to get on with the meeting, but again, thank you, board, for your nice compliments, and thanks for all you do, and I hope everybody has a good holiday season.
Next up, I'd like to share information about the Board of Education candidate filing. Board candidate filing opened yesterday at the St. Louis County Board of Elections. As of today, 3 candidates have filed for the 2 open positions on the Parkway Board of Education. I will now state the candidates' names in order that they will appear thus far on the ballot, and allow them to stand if they are in the audience or happen to be seated at the table. Candidates, as their names will appear on the ballot, are Matthew Schindler, Kevin Seltzer, Todd Williams. Filing will continue through Tuesday, December 26th, 2023 at 5 p.m. Candidates must file in person at the St. Louis County Board of Elections, 725 Northwest Plaza Drive, St. Anne, Missouri 63074. No filing will take place at the district office. Candidates may file between 8 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. Filing ends at 5 p.m. on the last day of candidate filing only. The Board of Election office will be closed on December 7th and December 25th, and may also close due to inclement weather. The election will be held on April 2nd, 2024. Next up is our consent agenda. We've all had an opportunity to review that, so may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented in the December 6th, 2023 board materials.
So moved.
Second.
Anything to be pulled to action or closed? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you. Next up, we have Dr. Beckner and Dr. Tiffany Holman-Bess joining us to discuss the Project Parkway 3.0 vision sets.
Well, thank you very much, President Todd, Vice President Hopper, members of the board, Dr. Marty, Mrs. Stover. It's a pleasure to be here. We certainly recognize that you guys have a lengthy agenda tonight with policy reviews and work sessions and reports. So we will and certainly try not to belabor this particular item. That said, if you'd indulge us with about 90 seconds of a walk down memory lane, because it was 1 year ago that we sat in the board workshop last year and laid out the entire process for Project Parkway that we've been walking down for the last 12 months or so. Of course, the planning began before that, and I'll give all the credit to the fantastic individual to my left who, when we get new people from other districts who join us in positions, they ask interesting questions. And one of the things that Dr. Holman Best asked early on was, hey, where's your profile of a graduate? Which is a pretty standard thing now in districts where you have something that shows, here's what we are expecting of our learners. And though we have a robust mission in Parkway, we didn't have something that really clearly laid out, here's our profile of a graduate. So we began talking about that, and people said, how is this different from our vision? Well, most people in Parkway didn't know what our vision was. So that was one thing. But two, we said, okay, we'll call ours a vision for a learner. But it's really, if you hear that similar language from other districts, that's certainly something that's very common right now. So this process around creating our vision for a learner began with community input and feedback. We started broad with a thought exchange, launched February 13th, so about 10 months ago. We had over 1,400 participants. In our data, over 70% of those participants were parents, with the remainder being staff. Those participants shared almost 1,300 unique thoughts, tons of ratings of those thoughts, which Thought Exchange gives us, so we were able to get a sense of what our community was thinking. We then took that information to our steering committee that read through all that information and tried to start framing out, okay, what is our community telling us? Looked at all kinds of stuff, created some graphics of, hey, what could this potentially look like? We then took all of those on the wall and put up every single word that people said and tried to start capturing, okay, what's going on here in these? And ultimately it looked like, oh, there seemed to be 4 categories of words here. Something about students being critical thinkers, something about them being resilient or adaptable. And we took that information back to Project Parkway, our community meeting. If you remember these Monopoly cards, which I know nearly all of you were there for, we started actually framing out, okay, if there were these 4 things, what might those look like? And get lots of community input and feedback and spend time really working through what might this look like and what do we think about our learners and what are the words that we actually want to use to describe what we're trying to do with our kids and what that looks like. There's Mr. Reedy right there, working hard, Mr. Reedy. Thank you for that. Then we brought to our board meeting, to our board workshop, I believe. Here's where we're starting to frame this out, and here's what this is starting to look like. We then took that back to our steering committee and had the steering committee really work through, okay, if we have something that our community has now told us, both broad scale and in the Project Parkway meetings, here's what we're starting to think this looks like. Our steering committee really took that and framed out even more specifically, okay, let's see how this works. We then actually had them vote and place stickers on which ones of these do you think most accurately capture what our community is telling us and where we go from here. We then took that steering committee feedback and drew a very ugly early version of the vision for a learner. Thank goodness we have professional graphic design people who were able to take this nonsense and turn it into something much more appealing. And we went through multiple versions to get to this. And this wheel, you see the words on it. Then we had versions where there were no bullets and there were bullets. I mean, we refined this whole process and continued to really try to get to where we are today, which is what we're bringing for your consideration this evening is our vision for a learner, where we have 4 parts to it: a critical thinker, an empowered learner, a connected citizen, and a resilient individual. I know the board has a copy of that in front of you as well tonight. And we mentioned, I believe it was Ms. Hopper a minute ago who mentioned that we're an innovative district and really pushing. And this really, while this honors a lot of the work of our community, there are also some things in here that are saying, no, we want to be different. We don't see in many districts a vision for a learner or profile of a graduate the idea about a resilient individual. And when we went out and got community feedback, it was very positive that we're capturing the whole child here, that it isn't just about kids succeeding academically in their classes, but really about them being whole people. In fact, here was our feedback. If you recall, we actually put our vision sets up in every school building across the district, and we gave the opportunity for our community to continue to give feedback around that. We even had our elementary school teachers put it in their classroom newsletter, because we know that those get read. Hey, give us feedback. And we've said 4-point scale, how well did we capture this? And nobody was at a 1 or a 2. Every single response was at that 3 or 4 level, which showed us we're really capturing and what our community was telling us after all of that work, which was wonderful. We do have one word, and I appreciate Ms. Hopper, who called yesterday, and we talked through this word agency, and because we had about 200 total comments submitted from our community this last semester. So we have those vision venues up in our schools. 6 of them were about this one little word, agency, which is really interesting. That's not a ton, but it was enough to say, huh. And I appreciate the call, because this is a word that we're going to have to educate our community on, because it's not one that we're super familiar with. But agency has actually been around this whole process. I showed you these pictures earlier, but I'll just zoom in. Here was April 17th. We had that word agency showing up on one of our initial sets when we put all those words on the board. Down there, bottom right there, we had agency kind of hanging out. It's a little word that's been floating around this whole time. And agency is this definition, which I won't read verbatim, but I'll leave on the screen. But I want to highlight a couple words. The capacity to take action. And we don't want our kids to just be learners who sit in class and just do what they're told. We want them to take action. We want to innovate so that they see that they have agency, ownership, power over what's happening with them. I actually had the good fortune to just visit some schools over in the Kansas City area just yesterday. I walked in the building, and the very first thing in their vision is we're here to promote learner agency. And when we walked around their schools and we talked to kids, we heard them say, I feel like I have actual impact here. I feel like I can do things. So you're right to just ask the question, Ms. Hopper, hey, what's this word? What does it do? Well, this is an opportunity for us to innovate and continue to work for our kids so that they can have power and be empowered learners. So certainly appreciate it. Also, this is our current CSIP, and we have 3 mission-focused goals. When we think about the word agency, it actually touches all 3 of these. That if we want our students to feel like they belong, part of belonging is I actually matter here. That the things I do, the things that I take action on, I have agency over, that I belong here, I matter here. Or even in our academic goal in the middle, we were intentional to use the word their goals, that we wanted to not be our goals for them, but their goals, that they can have agency over what they're doing and how they achieve those. And then certainly when we think about our students developing a sense of that school is relevant and meaningful for them, that they have a purpose and a path, you can't develop that if you don't have agency over yourself and your life. And so while I want to call out just this one word because it was an excellent question from Ms. Hopper, and we've been having lots of conversation, when we zoom out and we think about agency, it's got all of these pieces, our learner's identity, their mindset, their belief. And we want a lot for our kids that's not just do well in school, get good test scores. We want you to be a resilient individual. We want you to be a connected citizen. We want you to be an empowered learner. We want you to be a critical thinker. And so we certainly appreciate the board considering this tonight, and thank you for the chance to share about our vision for a learner.
Thank you both very much. I don't have any questions. Does any other board member have any questions?
Thank you for your time yesterday.
Thank you.
I just want to, Kevin and I think had a little discussion. Strategic plans, what we're talking about here, moving forward with Project Parkway, one of the characteristics is it should stretch the organization. It's not about status quo, it's not about discontinuing the work. So I think when Kevin, Dr. Beckner talks about agency and maybe some other aspects, there are some things in here that are stretching, and that's important because I think, as Tiffany said earlier, we got some work to do, and we need to think about what we have to do to make sure every student is successful. So it's not about just continuing, it's about stretching. So whether it's agency or other things that we need to do, and we'll continue the work second semester and finishing the work and where we're going with our future beyond the vision, it's really about where we're going to make sure our students are successful in the future. Because we like to think we're doing well, and we've done well, but we got some work to do. And I think, again, it should be a stretch.
And I think part of our discussion too was, how are we gonna monitor this and how are we gonna measure it? How are you gonna measure if a student has agency? And so that begins with the process of understanding what it is. And then how do we get there? Because this is the ultimate goal for them, is to, when they leave here, this is what we're hoping to see. And I do love all of the four big headings that have come together over the course of time. So, so I think that was just sort of, how are we gonna make sure that this vision is being met over time?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you both very much. So, having heard all that, may I have a motion and a second that the Board of Education approve the vision for a learner as presented in the December 6th, 2023 board meeting materials?
So moved.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mrs. Hopper?
Yes?
Ms. Matt Franklin?
Yes.
Mr. Reedy?
Yes.
Mr. Schindler?
Yes.
Mr. Seltzer?
Yes.
Mr. Spector?
Yes.
Mr. Todd?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Next up, 13.0 is policy review. Policy review includes 13.01 GBAA.BP, staff extra duty assignments, and 13.02 GCBA.BP, professional staff compensation. We've all had an opportunity to review those policies, and some of us have been a part of the evolution of changes to those. Do any board members have any further questions about either of those policies?
I happen to have one question.
Okay.
On
Dr. Bogus, can you join us up here?
GCBA. So the question is on the second page, item number 4.
I'm sorry, can you tell me which one?
Oh, I'm sorry, GCBA. This is the professional staff compensation.
Second page?
Mhm.
Okay.
Item number 4. So I took a pause on the second sentence. Employees are responsible for fully apprising district of their relevant background experiences when first being employed in the position. Once the employee is initially placed on the salary schedule, the district is under no obligation to review the placement. Can you explain that a little bit more? Because and why I ask it is it almost sounds like it's a little bit in conflict to employee responsibility, where if they're being held responsible to verify that their salary schedule placement is correct, and say they find that it's not, then they need to be able to work with the district to go back and make that correct. So that's why I was kind of questioning what that's all about.
So this policy passed the first time, and so the revision of that did not take into account this. But when we look at practice for us, when we do hire a staff member, be it a teacher, a salary is given to the teacher based on their experience. The Human Resources Office sends that to them electronically so that they know an agreement then is understood between the candidate with HR to know where they fall in the salary schedule. And then an agreement is made when an offer is presented. And so when I look at this, it might be one of those that if later they say differently, that was already agreed upon salary. But again, I'm reading this right now. I'm not sure I fully understand your question, to be honest.
Well, it said they're responsible for apprising the district of their relevant background experience when first being employed. So you would think that that would have been already established before they were employed, because that's why they were given the offer, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, and so then if they're once they're initially placed on that salary schedule, it says the district is under no obligation to review the placement. So I was confused, I wasn't clear on what that meant. So once they're there, the district does not make sure that it's correct and that it's in order properly?
So again, I guess it would be that if a individual then a year later said, well, I had more experience or a different degree or whatever, it's not the responsibility of the district then to go back and do that. It's their responsibility in the initial agreement offer and the approval of that offer up front to be understanding of where we're coming in on their salary. We do have individuals that then get additional, I'll say certifications, et cetera, and we honor those as we talked earlier in the evening. And so those, we do go back and look at those in terms of if somebody got their master's or their bachelor's plus 15 and presented that information, we move them on the salary schedule.
Okay.
I think what he's saying is it's the employee's responsibility, not the district's, once they're an established employee.
Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to be clear on what I was reading and understanding here, so that's all.
I think it'd be fair to say, Dr. Bogus, that when we were hiring somebody, you are real clear about that. You asked them, please present everything that you need to present right now.
Right,
before
right. And we go
determine
back, we go back and forth because within that conversation and then electronically through email to lay out, Suzanne does a wonderful job in our office to map out all of the certifications, years of experience. If they're coming from another school district, we can honor up to 10 years per our CBA with the teachers union. We go back and forth on that to make sure that they are in agreement with the salary that we have before the final, I would say, agreement is made with them for a salary that we bring to the board.
Okay. And this is all from MSBA language?
Correct.
Correct, so that's
Right.
been covered that way, okay.
I guess I'll take the opportunity. Most of the revisions of these two policies are things as we look at MSBA information that we look to see on these two particular policies. There are certain edits we wanted to make that made them more appropriate to Parkway versus another district in the Missouri region to where they might be adopting those. Those are the strike-throughs that we were bringing forth tonight.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Dr. Boggs. These policies will be up for approval at the next regular board meeting. Next up is 14.0. We have a report on social emotional support services and school counseling comprehensive program evaluation. So I'd like to invite Erin Schulte, Dr. Erin Schulte, Coordinator of Counseling and Character Education, and Sherry Magaja, our Parkway Director of Social Emotional Support Services, to join us.
Good evening, President Todd, Vice President Hopper, members of the board, Dr. Marty, Mrs. Stover. Thank you so much for having us tonight and allowing us to talk to you more about the mental health supports in Parkway.
This presentation will discuss mental health and the state of our students post-COVID. And the green ribbon is the international symbol of mental health awareness. And the color green symbolizes growth and new beginnings. And so you will see that there was one placed for you to be able to wear in honor of your mental wellness, as well as honoring those that are your colleagues and your friends and strangers, recognizing that well-being is important. We also shared pins in the back for those of you that are participating.
We are all pretty familiar with our mission, but I think it always bears repeating before we start a report like this. We know that the Parkway School District mission is to ensure that all students are curious, capable, caring, and confident learners who understand and respond to the challenges of an ever-changing world. The longstanding commitment of the district has been to develop these 4 qualities in our students. This commitment has also seen its share of barriers. Most recently and most notably, the biggest challenge has been to overcome the isolation and fear brought on by the global pandemic. In response to those challenges, and we just heard Dr. Beckner and Dr. Holman-Best discuss some of the goals that we have in order to increase a sense of belonging and a sense of social emotional well-being in our students. The 2 of us, along with our school counselors, our care coordinators, our social workers, and our social emotional behavior specialists, all of the positions that we're about to talk to you a little bit more about, believe there's nothing of greater importance than supporting and boosting the well-being and feelings of belonging in our students. Through this report, we intend to show you the ways in which our mental health staff significantly contribute to making those goals a reality. In the June board meeting, you all approved several questions for us to look more deeply into and investigate, and we have organized our report around those questions. So the first of those was, what are the current mental health needs of students? We answered this question in 3 phases. We organized it with the national data, Missouri data, and then our own specific Parkway data. Even before the pandemic happened, we noted that the data for this for students was trending in the wrong direction. We noticed it so much here in Parkway that we even organized a mental health task force around it to make plans about how we were going to serve our students. Then we saw what happened across the world, and what we know from data on prior pandemics and prior events that have closed down schools for extended periods of time is that the research clearly indicates that there will be both immediate and long-term adverse consequences for many students and many children. The data that you see on the screen, much of it is from a report done by the CDC. They did this report over the course of 10 years, so between 2011 and 2021. This report was published in 2021. I'm not going to read the slides to you, but I do want to highlight a couple things, and I want to note that this study was done throughout the country. It involved over 17,000 responses to surveys from students, much like ours. It's considered a valid and reliable study. It's also a very diverse sample of students. But we see that in 2021, 42% of high school students felt so sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks in a row that they stopped doing their usual activities. I point this out because hope or lack thereof can be a really big indicator of suicide or suicidal ideation. The second one I want to draw your attention to is that in early 2021, they saw that emergency department visits in the United States for suspected suicide attempts went up 51% for female students and 4% for adolescent boys compared to the same period in 2019, so prior to the pandemic. That's just a really staggering statistic and large jump. And then finally, we saw increases in students engaging in non-suicidal self-injury. So 1 in 5 female students and 1 in 7 males said that they harmed themselves on purpose.
Data on youth and mental health across the state of Missouri largely mirrors that national data. The Missouri Department of Mental Health reports that 34.7% of Missouri students said that they felt hopeless, sometimes, often, or always. And this statistic is important because feelings of hopelessness often lead then to depression and deeper levels of concern. The Missouri Department of Mental Health also found that 20.6% of Missouri students engage in non-suicidal self-harm, and thoughts of suicide also seem to be on the rise, with 1 in 10 Missouri youth who were surveyed reporting that they considered suicide in the last year. These statistics within our Missouri youth are worrisome and they're alarming. When we talked with both parents, students, and staff, it was quite interesting because they astonishingly figured out that the largest part of what we're asking about our students' mental health and their wellness, of saying what really is the biggest concern, they outlined 3 areas consistently and in the same order. They stated that our students are really struggling most with anxiety, and secondly, with depression, and third, with stress management and emotional overwhelm. Through a program that we have, it's just an incredible program, much to Dr. Schulte's investment. Our student wellness data is a program where an agency comes and they really talk to our students and they screen them. And this school year has begun, and we have already screened then 3 high schools and a small portion of our middle school. And what we have come to best understand is that yet again, 58% of students that have opted in, so those are students that we've already identified and we know we have concern for, that 58% have positive screen results. And those positive screen results then are outlaid to say that they're reporting higher suicide ideation, reporting suicide attempts. And I think what's most important to really understand is that these types of disclosures are often very hidden and they're quiet. And so they're above the national average of what we know currently within the questioning our students this school year. When we look at what we asked of them last year in the same program, it's quite similar. So Parkway students reported suicide ideation higher, again, than the national average. And of the students that we recognize that in was in our 5th grade students, who this year are in 6th grade. It's also just really worth noting that Parkway students reported self-injury close to the national average across the district, but higher on the national average for 5th graders, again, in this past year. Students also reported above the national average for their lifetime. Possible mental health wellness focus areas that we need to take note on are students that have internalizing, attention, rumination, and self-harm behavior, plus suicide ideation. Those are the areas with which we have learned more about as it relates to the student wellness program. It really is our goal to have students opt out so that we're best able to find those students that are really struggling, potentially mostly with the ruminating and the internalizing, so that we ask them what they're thinking and they're feeling, not just what we see in behaviors in externalizing ways.
So on the screen now, you see the counselor suicide screening data. This indicates the number of times a student said, wrote, or did something that prompted a staff member to worry that that student might harm themselves. In these cases, counselors respond by conducting a suicide screener and determining whether or not that student is in need of a full assessment, which would then be conducted by one of our care coordinators or our social workers. You'll notice on the screen that it says that the total number was 108. However, this data we had to have into you long before today. So I looked this morning, and that number as of this morning was 128.
Once a student then has indicated when on a screener that there is concern for suicide ideation, our care coordinators and our social workers step in to complete a full suicide assessment. And what that means is they're seeking to better understand the intensity of the student's thoughts, their method, their plan, and their intention. And since this report was written, much like what Dr. Schulte explained, the number of assessments has increased to 76. Following those assessments, this is work that quite honestly I'm pretty proud of. So the students disclose and are assessed by our care coordinators and our social work staff. And then after that assessment, they make a determination of what they're going to do based on what that student needs. And so what you see is that the majority of the time, 20-some%, students then receive outside services, so an urgent, immediate therapeutic appointment, whether it's with a therapist or with a psychiatrist. Also, our staff safety plan. So they safety plan with students and they safety plan with parents. And in addition to that, they safety plan with their buildings. So how do we ensure that students are secure in a safe environment and supervised within the school building? And one of the smallest, yet sometimes what they will do is they'll make a referral to our hospitals for immediate psychiatric support and safety and possible medication modification. So this is important work, and I think it shows that when a student is really saying at a heightened level, I need help because I am potentially going to hurt myself, our staff involve other staff, they involve parents, they involve students, and they ensure that before that child leaves the building and when the child returns, that the child is safe and that we do everything in our power to ensure that we do due diligence. I think it's important also as a data point to just look at 504 data. Section 504 is often thought of as applying only to students with physical or health impairments. However, of the 926 students who qualified under Section 504 last school year, the majority have a 504 plan to address symptoms of ADHD. 38% of 504 eligibility students have a mental health impairment, often addressing diagnoses such as anxiety or depression. And it's important to also recognize that most students have more than one diagnosis, and recognizing that 504 plans then address multiple disabilities and symptoms.
Another population we wanted to draw your attention to, and that is also increasing, are our English language learners or newcomer students. You can imagine acclimating to a new culture, learning a new language, generally feeling some form of isolation or loneliness because you've likely left some folks that you love at home, can all bring on a whole lot of stress. That, in addition to our students who have refugee status, have almost certainly experienced some level of trauma before coming here. Also, it's an extremely rigorous process to even become a refugee here in the United States. We cannot ask families whether or not they have refugee status legally, but we did talk with our lead ELL teacher, and she told us that if a student comes to us from Colombia, Russia, or the Ukraine, we could be pretty sure that they're either a refugee or have had some sort of adverse experience prior to coming here. So we also wanted to draw your attention to those growing numbers of that specific subset of students. When students experience adversity to that degree, we might see different behaviors at school, and very often it is our mental health staff who are responding to their needs. The second question that you all asked us back in June, or approved for us to investigate back in June, was what is the current continuum of care for mental health in Parkway? And so to answer that, we turn to our multi-tiered systems of support. You'll see on the bottom there, Tier 1, intentional instructional practice, that is service for all students. Tier 2, were targeted interventions, services for some students, perhaps because they did not get what they needed at Tier 1. And then Tier 3, intensive interventions, which we would describe as services for few students. And when we look at our staff with regard to that continuum of care, we see that the school counselors are really serving students at Tiers 1 and 2, so they are considered support for all. Our care coordinators are at Tiers 2 and 3, and they are for some and few. Social workers, again, similarly, Tiers 2 and 3, support for some and few. And our social emotional behavior specialists run the gamut, Tiers 1 through 3, and support for all. The next question that you all approved for us to investigate were, what are the roles of those mental health staff that we just named? So we're going to go through that in order of the tiers that they serve. So we'll start with our school counselors. What you can see on the screen here is the Missouri Comprehensive School Counseling Program components. School counselors are supposed to divide their time into 4 different areas. So that first one, the school counseling curriculum, that could really be looked at as classroom lessons or structured groups, and that is service to all students K through 12. Those really focus on probably one of 3 topics: academic skills, social emotional development, or their career development. Individual student planning looks a little bit like that. It's just, it's usually on one of those same topics, but it is one-on-one, individual, as that word suggests. So, you know, that looks like career planning, that looks like, you know, making your schedule, selecting your courses, decision-making skills, and your own personal goal setting. So that would be one-on-one counselor with student. The third area is responsive services. And that could look like brief individual counseling, that could look like small group counseling, but that's also where the crisis intervention on the part of our counselors comes in. So that could be about any of those 3 topics. We also lump the suicide screener in there as well. So that would be them, responding to an immediate need that a student has. And finally, system support, and that would include just anything that really the school as a system needs. So that's them, planning what their program is as school counselors at their school, but that's also community relations, parent communication, counselor, their own professional development falls into there. And so every month, we audit our time about where are we spending our time as school counselors here. I randomly choose days at the beginning of the year, and then counselors submit a sheet where they audit their time. For every 15 minutes, they document which bucket their time was spent in. And so we compiled this data for the past 5 years. The state of Missouri also has, or DESE has suggestions based on level about where and how much time they should spend in each area. So I'll go through it by level. You can see here on the right side, the blue is the DESE recommendations, and the red is where we are with our data in Parkway. So you can see that we are under in the amount of curriculum we provide at elementary. We are over in individual planning. We're about right at responsive services. We are over in system support. And then another thing that I did not put on that chart before this was non-guidance, which is just another term from DESE, where it's things that the counselors do that really could probably be anyone at the school to do, but it sort of just falls on their plate. They don't have any special training to do it, but they are the ones doing it. And so looking at that, we dove into the qualitative data to figure out why this might be, why we might be over in some areas and under in others. With curriculum, particularly at the elementary level, we heard a lot, especially if the school only has 1.5 counselors. It's really hard to plan around a schedule when you are potentially the only mental health provider in the building at any given time. So not having a full-time care coordinator and then not having a full-time counselor partner really inhibits their ability to do that, because they may need to respond to a crisis at some point in time during that. So hate to be pulled from a classroom lesson for something of that nature, but of course you would. Then for individual planning, they're over. And when I looked into the qualitative data for that, it really looks like in individual planning, IEP meetings, 504 meetings, all of the things that lead up to that fall into the individual planning time. And so they are spending quite a bit of time on those things. For system support, they really did talk a lot about, and it's interesting because these are all good things and all things we want to do, and yet they're over in the amount of time that they're supposed to be spending there. But that is really, parent education or collaborating with parents, collaborating with teachers. They also, I think worth noting, they run the problem-solving meetings quite often at their schools, and so that would fall into the system support bucket as well. Non-guidance for elementary, when I dug into that, they are most often asked to do lunch duty almost every single day. They also complete review of existing data packets for SSD. That is they have the most of any level to do, and that takes quite a bit of time. And then they also, during the sub shortage and beyond, have been asked to substitute teach for our teachers when we could not find another substitute. For middle school, you can see again, we're under in curriculum. We're about right for individual planning, pretty close for responsive services, maybe a little bit over in system support, and also over in non-guidance. They cited a lot of the same reasons as elementary school counselors, but they also, they talked about working around teacher schedule, working around the building schedule to get into the classroom. But they also really talked about their level of crisis response, and I would explain it that I think they're really struggling to get out from under so much crisis, out from under responding at a tier 2 or tier 3 level to get to prevention and tier 1. We can also look at for system support, similar to the elementary school counselors. They collaborate with families, they collaborate with other teachers, and they also quite often are responsible for running the problem-solving meeting. So that would count also as system support. Their most frequent non-guidance activities, similar to elementary school, were also being asked to substitute teach and doing lunch duty every day. And then finally, for our high schools, you could see also that we are under in the amount of curriculum. We're over in individual planning, just under in responsive services, right on for system support, and again, over in non-guidance. I think the academic focus at our high schools inhibits them the most from getting into classrooms to do universal lessons and prevention work. They have to plan around a teacher's schedule. They kind of have to get permission to go in and do it, and sort of, whether that's trying to interrupt academic lab or interrupt the curriculum that the teacher had planned that day or that time, just can be busy and difficult. And I think too, thinking about high school schedule, there's just so much going on at any given moment, at any given time, that throws off the normal schedule there. So that was, in digging into qualitative data, what we saw there. Individual planning, I think, can also be explained by the 504s, the IEPs, but also the focus on academics and really looking at students' course planning and course schedules. There are certain times of the year where they spend a lot of their time one-on-one with students, planning those things for them and with them. And so I think that explains that pretty well. We were pretty spot on for the other two, but for non-guidance, their biggest non-guidance activity would be to coordinate school-wide testing. So ACT, SAT, PSAT, AP exams, ASVAB, you name it, the high school counselors have a big role in planning that for the whole school. And it is quite time-consuming with all of the different needs that students have, the different accommodations, and things like that. And so that not necessarily considered a counseling duty, but they do it, and they do it well, and they do it with fidelity. But they also are asked to do lunch duty, and they're also asked to do hallway duty, so those things came up for them in non-guidance as well. And I kind of went through the qualitative data, but I did summarize it for you also on these slides, but I'm not going to read that to you because I just went over that with you. I did want to highlight the qualitative data from students and parents. So we asked them, what is the school counselor, what do they do for you? How do you perceive them? How do you see them? Our students really felt like they helped me with my academic and my personal concerns, and I really liked, many students mentioned that the counselors make school a safe place for them to be. And so I thought that was really fitting for what we try to do. Parents had a similar response. They said that they provide mental health support, they advise my student academically, and they assist also with the transition, whether that be from pre-K to kindergarten, 5th to 6th, 8th to 9th, or their post-secondary plans as well. And my last thing that I just want to point out about the structure of school counselors, our ratios. When MSIP 6 came out, it set a new, and I'm going to quote, minimum standard for the amount of students we should have per school counselor. So both MSIP 6 and the American School Counselor Association say that we should have no more than 250 students per school counselor. MSIP 6 went a little further and said a desirable standard would be no more than 200 students per school counselor. And so currently, none of our schools meet the desirable standard. 16 of our schools meet the minimum standard, and 12 of our schools do not meet the minimum standard.
After taking a look at our school counselors, let's answer the question, what is the role of the care coordinator and the social worker? Parkway School District social workers and care coordinators are trained mental health professionals, and they are hired to enhance the district with their knowledge and skills by assisting with mental health concerns, behavioral concerns, academic supports, through consultation, collaboration with school, home, and the community. Specifically, they work with students, staff, and families by providing those targeted interventions, as you saw on the MTSS graphic for tiers 2 and 3. And that includes, but isn't limited to, risk assessment, psychological education, crisis intervention, coordination of resources, mental health services that can include both group and individual therapy. There's 9 Parkway School District social workers, and they're shared amongst all buildings across the district to include preschool through high school. There's 18 Parkway School District care coordinators who are utilized throughout the district, having 1 care coordinator in each high school, 1 care coordinator in each middle school, and a shared care coordinator between 2 elementary schools. In the graphic that we already looked at, as Erin explained, just wanted to re-emphasize that the position of the care coordinator and the social worker most often is utilized within that tier 3 and 2 area. So those targeted interventions, most intensive interventions for our highest need students. And just explaining their services in a way that's understood through a leveling system. We often talk about care coordinators and social workers and their role, and the services that they provide are in a priority of 1, 2, and 3. And so a service level of 1 would be the lowest level of what a student might need. And that might simply be crisis intervention. So I might help you in one time due to something that is happening with you. And it also might be that you just need psychological education. Psychoeducation is what we call it in the therapy world. So it's just something like coping strategies or things to help you understand your mental illness or how to just have resilience in a different way or cope at school. Sometimes within the staff, we talk about a service level 1 as I check in with you. It's not something that's always routine. It's that I know about you and I check in with you just routinely. The second level of service would be case management, case consultation. So that might be someone who is receiving outside services, therapeutic, psychiatric services, and so managing those services for that student, communicating with both staff and parents, and consulting consistently to make sure that we monitor and keep those students well and that we just know how they're doing. So often we talk about them as, I'm working with you. So not only do I check in with you, but I'm really working with you on a consistent basis. Then the highest level of service is a service level of 3. And what that would consist is of direct, routine time that I meet with you. And that would be because of intensive wraparound services, which would mean more areas of your life. So quite possibly, it would require our multidisciplinary team, and we talk often about you. It's the case management of those services outside of school, both outside and inside, and then offering you those therapeutic supports. So that might be individual therapy at school. So we refer to that as I individually know you. An intake has been completed, there's goals that you're working on, and that's the highest level of service. We asked our students to tell us about the services that they received from their care coordinator and their social worker. And what was interesting is that they mirrored one another. And so we found that they were provided with supportive services in a myriad of areas, just like those service levels that we talked about from both the care coordinator and the social worker. And it just really demonstrates the overlap of these positions. What is the role of the social emotional behavior specialist and the teacher assistants? There's 7 individuals with skills in special education, academics, and mental health, and they make up what we call the SEB team. It's a multidisciplinary team of 5 Parkway School District social emotional support specialists and 2 teaching assistants that are highly skilled in building comprehensive systems and providing supportive interventions. 4 SEBs are assigned to all Parkway School District buildings, offering both consultation and coaching, And then there is one individual who provides contracting to assist students specifically. So just to highlight quickly, the consultation that our SEBs provide, that is assisting our schools with that MTSS design and infrastructure within the school and helping to support MTSS, also professional development, and they are our district trainers for nonviolent crisis intervention. So they consult with schools at more of a higher level, of a macro level in our schools. They also provide coaching when it comes to a student who's struggling and a teacher that needs some assistance. They might need modeling, they might need a plan written, they need an observation, someone to just help coach them. That's some of what they'll offer in a school. And it really is that tier 2 student that doesn't have severe needs, but is just continuing to need more than what's offered in a tier 1 system. And then contracting is a student that is specific, that needs more than what is being offered. And so an SEB team member will go into the school with a TA and write a consistent, often trauma-based plan for that student that involves teaching, and involves coaching for the adults, and just really one-on-one support. And then they have a TA that's highly skilled that provides the leadership of that plan and the consistency so that they can go to another school and provide support to another student. So when we asked how does the SEB meet the demands of the social, emotional, mental health needs of students, it really was reflected in what they said through the coaching, the consulting, and the contracting in what they talked about. The SEB role is a bridge builder between social, emotional staff, teachers, and administration by providing consultation to enhance confidence and teach and the effectiveness in dealing with student needs. In that coaching, it's the SEB engages in proactive efforts, such as professional development and training, and then contracting is what we talked about when it's that individual student. They're responsive when a student is in crisis and just needs additional support. So how can Parkway mental health staff be more effective in their roles? And one of those ways is to elevate mental health on a district-wide professional development as a priority. So what we know is the success of school mental health programs rely upon educator knowledge of mental health conditions, including how those conditions might manifest in school settings. So it's important for us to have the knowledge through professional development, as well as offer, which we've highlighted consistently, clarity of mental health roles in Parkway.
As I've already alluded to, one of the ways that we could improve is to offer more prevention/tier 1 services, both through curriculum and universals, and I think additionally to that, tier 2 as well. And then finally, an overall focus on mental health needs, because we can see that we have growing needs, and so how do we really focus in on what those needs are and how we can best respond. When we looked at student, parent, and staff responses to our survey about this question, we asked them, since you all asked us, how can they be more effective? We asked those groups of people, and astoundingly, again, they all came to, at least for school counselors, 3 main conclusions about how that could happen. One of them was that they wanted improved availability / some of them specifically asked, could we have more of them? Some of them asked for more of a focus on mental health and less of things that are not actual, you don't need counselor training in order to do. Can we get focused on the things that counselors are trained to do? And then finally, all 3 groups asked us if we could clarify the roles for everyone, since we have had some pretty recent additions of mental health staff members to our continuum of support.
When we asked students, parents, and staff as it relates to mental health data, our students responded that they wanted an increased availability for mental health professionals. And that specifically outlines in our elementary buildings, because those individuals are shared between two. And they asked for individual attention that's offered on a one-to-one sessions, creating a comfortable environment. What this speaks to is not that we don't have a comfortable environment, we do in every school. It's that it becomes uncomfortable when the mental health professional and the student are consistently interrupted. And that's what becomes uncomfortable due to crisis and then managing crisis. And parents' responses were really just more of a collaborative effort, a collaborative relationship, and more open communication. And then the staff were consistent in saying, we'd like to better know roles and what are the role definitions and how to mirror what the students and the parents are speaking to.
And so we have some recommendations for you tonight about how to be better. But before we do that, Ms. Begaj and I are extremely interested in research. We are encouraged to utilize research. We're both try to stay up on all of the things with the growing needs, with the changes that we see. One of the resources that we are often encouraged and led to is the EAB. And so this is a quote from a recent article that they published. We hear often people ask us, should schools really be doing that? Like, are you guys, like, mental health, is that a thing that schools really should be engaging in? And do you have the staff for that? And we really feel like the answer to that is yes. We should be supporting our students in all ways that we can. And we should really set ourselves up and our systems up to respond to the needs that we all have seen since 2019 and before. And so we felt like this quote really summed up how we feel. And I'm going to read it. It says, "Districts are the adolescent mental health providers of necessity and choice. Students often have nowhere else to go for mental health care. Even when external care is an option, data shows that students are far more likely to utilize school-based mental health services. Districts today cannot afford not to take the lead in helping their students be well enough to engage in their education." And I think this speaks to what you were saying before, Ms. Mapp Franklin, that if this is not in place, nothing else is going to be in place. We're not going to be able to do academics. We're not going to be able to get past anything but this. And we are really excited that we feel we have the right people on the bus, that we want to enhance the system that we have in order to best serve, again, the growing needs that we have seen for students even before we had a pandemic. So with that, our school counseling recommendations are the following. Number one, to move toward meeting the minimum standard for school counselor staffing as outlined by MSIP 6. Number two, to research structures, staffing, and allocations that would move Parkway school counselors closer to meeting the time allocations set forth by the Missouri School Comprehensive Counseling Program. Number three, to investigate the barriers that counselors face when trying to implement Tier 1 and Tier 2 support. And number four, to generate mental health resources for the influx of ELL and newcomer students who we see and who present specific needs.
The mental health recommendations, number one is to develop and implement a combined care coordinator and social work role for the school year of 24-25, to pursue staffing to cover elementary buildings, district lead support, and areas in the highest rates of mental health concerns, as data indicates for specifically the secondary levels. This would allow the care coordinator and the social worker to offer Tier 2 and 3 support and promote services at the highest level of MTSS, social emotional needs and mental health conditions. Number three, to continue to develop, implement, and support multi-tiered systems of support structures district-wide, pre-K through grade 12. And finally, research and develop a universal screener, as our CSIP indicates, specifically concentrating on the CSIP goals 1 and 3 of belonging. We wanted to thank you for your time and for your leadership. And I also just wanted to personally thank you that I get to work with Dr. Schulte. The work that we did together, it was profound. And it helped us really learn. It helped us learn the state of students and where they're at and what our staff needs to do in order to truly affect lives and help kids be safe and help them belong and to be well. And I think one thing that Dr. Schulte and I just honestly believe at our core is that students who are well, who are seen, who are heard, and who are known, they achieve at their highest level. We believe that. So thank you. What questions do you have for us?
Questions don't we have? Well, thank you very much for the in-depth evaluation that you all did. I know it was more than just the two of you, so we really appreciate everyone's participation in this. Having been around when the Mental Health Task Force was created and seeing the work that came out of that, I think we can all agree that we're in a better place than we were, 5 years ago. But we've had additional challenges since then, and obviously through your work and through just being in this district and seeing and encountering kids, so many people in different roles have seen that there's even more things that the Mental Health Task Force didn't even uncover. So I'm glad to hear and read some of your recommendations. Obviously, the question is how do we do those things, those 4 things in each area? The first question I'll ask is, do we need a revisit of the Mental Health Task Force? Do we need a follow-up to measure the benchmarks or the things that we set about to do 5 years ago and see how we achieved them and if we succeeded in doing what we set out to do 5 years ago, or should we take that hard analysis again and do the listening tours type of thing and really spend time with students and counselors and social workers and figure out, are we doing those things that need to be done to really reach students?
I think that's not a bad idea. I think we are, having been a part of that as well, I was really proud that we did put all of those recommendations, at least on paper, in place. And, one thing that we've been talking about a lot with Project Parkway and with MTSS is, you can't stop it then putting it in place. You have to monitor it. You have to give development about it. You have to check in on it. And I think this is a really good time. And also it's a different world that we had in 2019. We saw all the stats, how much everything shifted and changed. I'm so grateful we had that, because I hate to think about what would have happened to some of our students did we not have that mental health task force and not have those supports in place. But I do think it is a good time to see, now we've got these new structures, we've got these new positions. Is the actual way we've structured it working? Do we have the amount we need or we thought we needed in 2019? What are the differences in needs now versus then? So I think it would actually be a great time to update. Here's what we did, and here's what's been up and running, and here's how it's working, and here's how we think it could even be better.
Thank you. I had another question. One of you mentioned, I think it was you, Sherry, how the role that mental health plays in academics. And in really the question boils down to what are our priorities besides educating kids? And if educating kids, getting them a good quality education is our number one priority, I think that mental health obviously is key to them being able to succeed. So where does that fall on the ladder of things we need to do to create, an education system that is solid for our students?
I think I would just argue in balance of recognizing that students have had adversities. And when they have adversities of traumas that are big or they're small, it changes you physiologically. And so when we address what has happened to you in a way that is honoring to you as a person, creating a place that is of belonging and knowing, then we write plans and we gather together as a multidisciplinary team to look at what has happened to a child and what do they need in order to succeed at school. So I think the answer is just really, it's the priority of balance and recognizing that students aren't behavior. Behavior is a communication of a need, and our students have significant needs right now. And so how do we help them before the behavior? How do we be preventive in knowing their story of what has happened to them and honoring it, and then providing them with the services that they need so that it's a preventive system versus a reactive one?
So I had a couple of questions. The first one is, could you explain what you mean by a combined care coordinator and social worker role?
So the idea is that we have staff, both care coordinators and social workers, and so combining that role into a different title, like a mental health specialist, and so that they do both the roles of social work, and often we view that as resource giving, crisis intervention, kind of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and so we think of social work in that way. Social workers are also therapists and clinicians. That's true of that discipline. And so care coordinators are much of the same. They are therapists, they're LPCs or LCSWs, and so combining the role of both social work and care coordinators into one allows for us to have one mental health licensed clinician in each of our buildings.
So the second question is probably a little harder. We, as Kevin had mentioned, we had a disciplinary review not too long ago. One of the questions I have is where are we, or how do the care coordinators and counselors and SEBs fit in, and social workers fit into our disciplinary process, or even to help prevent some of our discipline process?
That is a complicated question, a good one. It is complicated. So where they fit in is in preventive, of trying to recognize, again, like as a student, we know when things have happened to you that you're going to have coping strategies that are maladaptive, potentially behaviors. And so how do we teach you skills in order to really mitigate that you won't need disciplinary actions? So it's the preventive piece. It's also then being involved with that student once a disciplinary action takes place to restore relationships, to better understand socially what is happening with you, what's going on in your life that you are fighting, that you're inappropriate or disrespectful with your language. Do you not feel heard? Do you not feel seen? Do you not feel safe at school? What's going on with outside of the school? So it's not something that often is directly involved. However, I do believe that it's something that from a lens of mental health, of recognizing that, again, behavior is speaking a communication of a need. And so having our mental health lens and perspective at tables through the structure of MTSS, looking at students, what do you need, what can we offer you, is part of discipline. It's either before or even after it occurs.
Are we doing that now, or is that like something we're working towards?
I would say that it's something more that we're working towards. And I wouldn't say that we are involved in it consistently.
I'll play off that a little bit then. You mentioned earlier that our screening is opt-in right now. So therefore, if we made the switch to go to opt-out, all kids to be screened, for the most part, internally, can we meet those needs? And even externally with services, are the service providers there? Because we hear problems right now with child therapists out there. It's hard to get in.
That's a great question. So we've been, partnered with Mental Health America for, gosh, I think it's been 3 or 4 years now. And we have been actually working to build up that partnership. And they have also been working to build up their partnership with outside therapists. So when a student screens and they screen positive currently, they might get referred actually internally to a care coordinator or social worker or an SEB or sometimes the school counselor. They might get referred though to this outside list where Mental Health America has these partnerships, and our students, as being part of the program, have priority where they promise they will get them in, and they will only give the families referrals where the therapist can get them in. And so that's just something we've extensively thought about with going opt-out. I would say that, Brian Kuhn, if you've ever met him, is our partner there, and we talk about that probably every time we meet. I think he believes and we believe we're at a good place where with that partnership and internal resources, building that capacity, and then him building the external resources, that we would be in a good place to go opt-out soon, we hope. That's been our goal since we started.
I think it would have to be strategically and well thought in executing it.
I just want to, by the way, great job. And one of the sessions I attended actually at the Blue Ribbon session in Washington, D.C. recently was University of Maryland is doing some study on well-being and wellness. And here's one of the things they said, and after hearing this report tonight, we're putting a lot of responsibility on us. And one of the suggestions is they're doing studying is the communities that are beginning to reach out to healthcare professionals. But Matt, to your point, that's a limited number. That communities need to build capacity with families and a larger community on this issue, because we probably can't hire enough professionals to take care of if we take full responsibility of this. So that's kind of outside, because I think the report was excellent, but how are we going to grow a community that really, and parents particularly, that are going to be engaged with us? And this will be over time. To Jeff's point, should we reconvene the mental health task force? I think that would probably be, in fact, I think that was one of the recommendations, Aaron, wasn't it? That we really need to grow a culture of mental health. And I think we've done a bit of that, but I think, how are we going to build a healthy community, a community that really cares? We can't take it all on. I mean, they're suggesting adding, a number of staff, but, just think about if we would go to a universal screening. Ooh, I mean, we would need some help from a lot of resources, I think. So that's just my observation tonight, thinking about that report I heard, and then how realistic is it that we can take this all on ourselves? It really is. We really are at a capacity issue here.
Well, some of the other, to tag on to that a little bit, and this is where some of my questions come in, is about the integration of the services. There's some other research out of UCLA that will say that we're so fragmented in providing mental health services within schools that we need to, and I was happy to see one of your things about talking about the redundancies or the overlap between the care coordinators and the social workers. And these are the things that have been recommended by school districts to look at, is the fragmentation of services, and might there be some way to integrate all of these collectively better and more efficiently, because the resources in both in both capital, human capital, and financial capital, we just don't have it. And so how can we make what we do have more efficient and effective? And I think that's what you were getting at in some of your recommendations tonight. And it would also seem that from the curriculum piece, I think that was one thing that I almost gasped at when I saw that, because I thought, that's what we need, is those counselors in that curriculum to help those students. And how can we help make that happen? Because that's where those students are going to get some of these things that we're talking about that they need. How do we do social, our emotion regulation, and how do we help them with coping strategies. And if they're not hearing that from their counselors in the classroom with their peers in an integrated fashion, that's not singling them out and pulling them into a counselor's office, then that might very well be most helpful for them.
Right, because what you're describing is a tier 3 system that is pretty well defined with the care coordinators and the social workers of service levels and what they're doing. And so I think you're absolutely accurate of how do we define tier 2 systems so that it is more preventive and students won't access or need tier 3 services.
And the other part of that is when you talked about, I was pleased to hear some of the feedback from students talking about a comfortable environment. I have heard from students that they don't like going to the counselor's office, or they're getting called out of class, or, this is where you go to get that kind of help. And that if it could be more confidential in a way, or in a way that they're not being singled out, so that, because some students don't want to go, or when I think in your report you talked about them being able to make a schedule with their counselor. But what does that look like, and how is that being done? And it sounds like in some cases it's been done in a very public manner, and they don't like that. They want the confidentiality to be able to see their counselor when they want to, but with the confidence that they don't have to explain why they want to see their counselor, because they may not be upfront with it, and then they'll get distracted and taken to a different direction because they didn't want to say why they wanted to meet with the counselor. So I'm wondering if you're looking at some of those paths as well as to how students, when they want to, can get to those resources during the day when in a more comfortable way within their learning environment.
I think some of what that is twofold, though, because when you think of universally, if we have investment of time in curriculum and in learning and teaching of lagging skills, to your point of both tier 1 and tier 2, and then in addition to that, we create the normalcy of you have a village at school that provides you with these services. So you learned that in preschool, you learned that in elementary, middle, and high, and those services transfer with you, and we monitor you better, and we know you. And that way, each time you enter into a school, you know who your people are and who you can trust. So it's all of what you said within the infrastructure of MTSS.
Yeah, and to follow up just a comment, what struck out of my mind was not necessarily all the kids that, have opted in. It's more, without getting into the academic classrooms, how many are we missing? And so getting into the classroom obviously is the start to get that support system started early. So that's the one thing that struck out to me is how many people are not going to these services, not necessarily the ones that are. So.
I want to go back to a comment Tiffany made about discipline, and Kevin made reference discipline hearing earlier, and I'm curious if we track, and this may be a question more for principals or administrators, do we track the mental health of students who are disciplined? Because as you commented, there's students that have trauma, and oftentimes the students with more significant trauma in their lives are ending up being more likely to be disciplined for a variety of reasons, because they're acting out because of the trauma they experienced and so on. So do we keep track of those students? Are we identifying the root cause of their actions in any of those instances? And beyond that, do we base our, and this might be a question, Greg, for our discipline review committee, but do we take into consideration when we're deciding the amount of discipline a student receives for something, do we take into consideration those traumas, the student's mental health, things like that?
I think currently this school year, literally in October, we just began to ask our care coordinators and our social workers to really identify their service level. And so to your question of are we tracking it, that's something that we could begin to do, but it's just a very new system of just identifying what level of service students need. So we can, in the future, begin to ask, is this a student that utilizes Tier 3, the highest level of mental health supports, and it would be known in Infinite Campus, confidentially known in Infinite Campus, and so it could pause our administrators to say, I might need to ask more questions, or before discipline is decided, to then go seek out that information from our mental health staff, our counseling staff, to know, are there mitigating circumstances that would have contributed to potentially why the student is acting or doing what they are doing.
We also did implement this year a more formal, while we don't necessarily require it at all of our schools, I think both of our staff members have used it, but where we have a re-entry meeting that involves one of our staff members, and whether that's to talk about what preceded the discipline event, or how are you feeling now going back, and to look at their emotions as they go back into school. And so we are working with Dr. Wagner to try to make that more universal, I would say, where it involves one of our staff members.
Thank you. I had one other question. I forget, one of you meant, there was a slide that showed showed the different high schools, 4 different high schools, and the amount of, I can't think of what it was, but what struck me was different high schools, their student populations seem to have different needs, or affected, their mental health shows up a little bit different. And my question, I guess, is how are we making sure we have enough support for those buildings that have a greater need, not just assigning one counselor, per 250 students or what have you. If there's a noticeably greater need in different schools, how are we addressing that, or how will we address that?
Well, that noticeably different need is within the north and the south of our district, and that data is pulled from multiple data points, students in transition, free and reduced lunch, discipline data. It demonstrates that more of our students in the north and the south have more complex adversity that they have experienced, and so those are the areas with which would need more mental health, social, emotional support, and quite specifically, it would be our secondary schools.
One of the other slides that I thought was rather interesting is in your appendices, the discipline referrals by area, page 94 to be exact. And what struck me is that in the South area, and I guess it's a matter of what constitutes a discipline referral and what makes it so egregious that they then get a suspension. Because in the South area, they have the highest number of discipline referrals. But when you look at the suspensions, at 214 over 741, it's only a 28.9% rate of suspension for the number of referrals that are taking place. And contrast that with Central area, they had only 207 discipline referrals, but of those, 101 resulted in suspensions of any type, which is a 48.8% rate of suspension. And then Fern, they're 57% suspension rate. So anyway, I just found that interesting as to how, first of all, what constitutes a discipline referral that doesn't turn into a suspension. And this is probably all elementary with middle and high school, so it probably complicates matters if there's, so I just was curious about what's going on with this particular data.
Within student services, we just had this conversation as a full team, and to really look at our practices and to help our administration and those that are making those decisions have more bumpers and guidelines to be more consistent with as they decide on suspension or they decide on what that discipline will look like. And so those are conversations that we are currently having.
Okay, thank you.
So I had another question from the report under what is the role of a school counselor. It says counselors proactively address student needs and respond to student needs according to X, Y, and Z. So when we're talking about proactively, how are we doing that consistently? Or I guess the first question is, what do we mean by proactively?
So that would be those structured groups or the curriculum, which you saw in our data, is not great. I'll just be honest, I'll just name it. And that is why one of the recommendations that I wrote is we have to figure out what's going on there and how we got here at all three levels, because I think we can see that it's not happening as much as the state of Missouri recommends it should be.
Anyone have anything else?
Oh, we could go on all night. I will-
Well, I will end by saying thank you again for all the time and effort that went into this, and really the care and thought that went into the questions and how you reached out to these students. Do you have a timeline on when we might hear a follow-up as to how some of these recommendations may progress?
I think we're hopeful. We look at the guy that's in charge. I think we're hopeful. Maybe we could put a little pressure. Mid-February, March, earlier, January 1.
Well, I think
Tomorrow.
The budget process is underway, so.
Let me just say, that's a big question, Mr. Tyler, since we're just doing the presentation right now, and it's been a long process to get here. Just remember, we had the targeted review last year with social workers that wove into this conversation on the comprehensive piece. So I think what we need to do is gather this feedback, the questions that you've had, and then find an appropriate time to look and give an update. Could possibly be something we talk at the workshop in spring and let you know kind of where we're at and what we're doing and what the plans are for next year to move forward.
honestly, to be fair, I mean, they did a great job. And it's a wonderful, some good recommendations. But the but is, we also have recommendations coming from TLA and some other areas, technology. So this is, just to be fair, this isn't the only recommendations that are on the table. And SAT spent about 2 hours on Monday, evaluating where all the needs are. So important needs here, important needs also in TLA, technology, security, other areas. So we have to weigh that. That'll be some of our discussion in the next couple of months, couple of weeks, couple of months.
Well, can we just say thank you for all that you do and all of your mental health professionals that are in our schools. And I'm sure that you and everybody, all of our SAT and our special school district people as well, and all of our counselors, because you guys save lives every day, and there are things that we don't hear about. And I used to work at WashU Department of Child Psychiatry, and I hear some of the worst of the worst stories, and to be able to even work in that capacity is a gift that not everybody can do. And so thank you, because you are very gifted to be able to do that work day in and day out. So thank you.
Sure, and we don't have to introduce them personally, but you do have representatives here from.
We do. We have people that are really important. So we have part of our SEB team, and we have 3 of our social workers and counselor here today. And so those are our champions. Yeah. We
And
appreciate them.
Special needs, special education, did you say that?
Special education, Amy Blumenfeld, she's a good friend, and she already went through this process, so she knew that she could offer some encouragement. So it's very appreciated.
Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you all again. Okay, next up, we actually have a work session on the 24-25 budget assumptions. So I'd like to welcome Patty Bedborough, our CFO, and Dawn Trokey, Executive Director of Finance, join us.
around 65 more slides. We'll get you out of here before
Just
midnight.
65?
So thank you very much for having us here tonight. Let me see if I can get this going. As you know, we start all of our work with our mission in mind. And of course, when we're developing the budget, our goal 3, which is about resources, whether it's facilities, finances, time, personnel, all of that figures in as components when we're creating our budget. So just to briefly go over our timeline, as you can see, we are here presenting your budget assumptions. In the month of November, once we finalized the revised budget, we started really unpacking the possibilities for the 24-25 school year. We started looking at revenues first, so that's kind of where we land. Start looking at our major sources of revenue. As we move forward into January, February, March, we're then going to have our program budget development. We're going to have our staffing development, whether it's our existing staff, and then looking at our salary increases, but then looking at, is there needs for additional FTEs, et cetera, and then what are our changes in staffing with enrollment projections as well. Once we compile all that, we know that we need at least a surplus budget, balanced budget, surplus budget. We'll talk more about fund balances in a little bit. But then in May is our next budget presentation to you. And with that, that will be our formalized budget where we'll go through our revenues, our expenditures, and then of course we'll compile that into our about, 150-page book. That is now our 2-time award-winning budget book for the 24-25. We'll also in there have some future year estimates as well. So this is a very familiar graph to you. This gives our fund balance story. So of course our ski slope that in the downward turn that we do not want to repeat. We know that at that point in time after the Great Recession, we didn't necessarily put a cap on our spending, even though there was clearly not a large increase in our revenues during that time. So very quickly, we had built some recurring expenditures, utilizing our fund balance, which, as you can see, was not a very good practice. So then we had to essentially spend over a decade to climb out of that in order to actually have year-round cash and money to invest and actually earn interest. Our overnight money earns a little bit more than 5% on a daily basis. So that's a wonderful, wonderful thing. And as you know, when we received the ESSER fundings and we had some expenditures that we were putting towards utilizing those funds that were not recurring revenues, we promised that we would book those or budget those based on our operating budget so that we wouldn't have a funding cliff when that ended, but then we would take that revenue and essentially save that to our fund balances. So certainly that combined with, other revenue and expenditure controls have certainly paid off and has helped to increase our fund balance percentage. So just kind of to review, just where do all of our revenues come from? You're very familiar that over 88% of our revenues comes from local sources. So we also have just over 5% now from state sources. So used to be under 5%, but of course with the transportation being fully funded, that has helped to increase that revenue source. Federal money used to be a little bit higher than this, but with this year being our last year of the ESSER III funding, certainly that has dropped down. So in our future years, when we look at it, we'll simply have our regular title funds and then our free and reduced lunch participation funding that comes through there as well. To take a bigger snapshot of what are the components of our local revenue, certainly property taxes are our biggest source of revenue. So we'll go into a little bit more detail on what our our projections are for there. Our second highest source of revenue for the district is our Prop C, so that's the 1% sales tax. That is then redistributed back to school districts based on our weighted average daily attendance. Keep in mind that our enrollment has dropped over the past few years. We were on a pandemic provision for the funding of Prop C, but this is our first year kind of to go back to our regular way of doing funding for Prop C, which is the prior year weighted average daily attendance. So while we have an increased amount per weighted ADA that'll be paid out with Prop C, we actually have a pretty substantial drop in enrollment or the weighted ADA for that. Okay, so getting into just our components of our property tax revenue. So of course, assessed valuation. This was a reassessment year, so we did have some really good growth in our assessed valuation. New construction, so that's new revenue that we're able to add to the district. Collection rate, so that is the percentage of what is collected versus what has been levied as tax revenue. So things that impact your collection rate are the settlement of protested taxes, of course, any taxes that are uncollected, and also then just the fees that we pay to St. Louis County, which is right around 1.5%. CPI is the Consumer Price Index, so that is an amount that is a factor within our formula, so it caps the growth. So for example, if you're a homeowner and you saw your local assessed valuation go up 10%, we only had a cap of 5%, so we can only take in 5% additional revenue, not the whole 10%. So then your tax rate is rolled back, so you don't have a complete 10% increase in taxes. And then the other component that we utilize is recoupment. And recoupment is our one-time each year, availability to then recover the lost revenues from the settlement of protested taxes. So looking at some of our projections, we do look at an assessed valuation growth. We believe that, certainly our housing market is still strong. So even though interest rates of 8% or so on mortgages, we still are seeing a very strong housing market. Our biggest threat is our commercial property, and you've heard me say this many a times, but especially with our last reassessment that just happened, we do not know how many taxpayers are filing under protest because the assessor's office was unable to find out the vacancy rate or occupancy rate of all the commercial, retail, and office spaces that are present. So we believe we'll have a higher than normal or higher than we have in the past paid under protest this year. So something to watch. So with that in mind, we have kind of lowered our collection rate to an estimate of 96%. That combined with the Senate Bill 190, which was the tax credit for our seniors. We do not have a way to quantify how much that credit will be. So we're just using right now a kind of a place saver for 96%. By May, we should know what our protest tax are, or the payments under protest, so we'll be able to help you with that. We know that CPI, Consumer Price Index, is lowering. This next year is not a reassessment year. So normally in non-reassessment years, we have very minimal growth in our existing property values and such. So we're predicting just a 0.5% increase in that. And in our new construction, over the last several years, we've had some continued growth in our value in our personal property, which pretty much has been led by just the value of used cars on the market. But in our future estimates, we do have a lower new construction rate as our estimates. Any questions? All right, putting all that together, you can see just a snapshot of our comparison. You'll see the large decrease from federal revenues from this current year, 11 million, going down to next year, the 4.8 million. So, most of that is the loss of our ESSER funding. You may also see the VST revenue, so our revenue that we receive from our students that live in the city. We will have no new enrollees in the upcoming years. I worked with Dr. Tyson. We believe a revenue estimate, an enrollment estimate for the future years is about 100 students decreased each year. So at first I was looking at just the graduating seniors, but then he was looking at other formulas too, just, some students move out of the area or just choose to discontinue making that long trip here. And so as we get closer to May, we will refine some of our estimates here as well. As you know, with federal programs, when we're budgeting, whatever we have as the expenditures is usually the amount that we use for our revenues. And that, sometimes means that we have to right size either from our Title I funding or our Title II, which we utilize heavily for professional development as well too. For probable changes, tonight you approved a tuition increase for the Early Childhood Center. So that is one of the items that we will add into our revenue estimates. The other thing that we'll be looking at is our food service program and the possibility of mildly increasing the meal prices for the upcoming year. We know that we have a nickel, I think, left over from the formula last year. There's a DESI formula that we have to work through, and they give us a standard price that we should be charging for our paid meals and such. So we do have a pretty strong evidence that we'll need to raise the prices by at least a nickel. But with that, I'm going to turn this over to Dawn Trokey, our new Executive Director of Finance, and she's going to walk you through just the different components of our budget. All right, so we talked about the revenue and how we gathered that and how we created that. Now we're going to talk about the expense side and how we figured that out. So building the expense budget requires all of these pieces of the puzzle. Each building will continue to get their allocation that they get every year. The elementary schools get $142 per student, middle schools get $153, and high schools get $205. So you take that time, the enrollment, and that's what their building budget is. So based on this allocation, the principals will set the goals for their building and budget accordingly with that budget amount in tow. And then the program directors will begin at that time by creating their goals for the upcoming year, and then they will build their budget using zero-based budgeting for that. We also use zero-based budgeting for the salaries and the benefits. And Dr. Cohen and Dr. Bogus will be reviewing enrollment and building needs, and then we'll be collaborating with us to figure out staffing and for each building and what they need to meet their goals. This is another very familiar screen for you. This is the breakdown of our 23-24 revised operating expenditure budget. Salary and benefits, of course, always make up the most of our operating budget. Right now, it's at 80.78% of our operating budget. Purchase services, supplies, materials, and student activities, they make up the remaining portion. This is a very common breakdown from year to year. It doesn't change much. So the first part in figuring out the expenditures of our budget is we need to ensure that we're trying to meet the district goals. So the district has done an amazing job over the prior year in building the fund balance, like Patty had discussed. And now the goal is to stabilize that fund balance in the years to come so that we have the reserve that we need. The next few slides we're going to walk through, we're going to show how we set the expenditure maximum and for the upcoming year so that we can maintain that goal. Zero-based budgeting is used throughout the district when we budget on our expenses. We utilize the maximum level to ensure that the district does not budget more in expenditures than the revenues that we have coming in. The first step in zero-based budgeting, like I said before, is setting those goals for the upcoming year, and then based on those goals, determine what is needed to obtain those goals, whether it's staff, whether it's supplies, whether it's services or equipment, or a combination of all. And then so the building budgets, next slide. The building budgets, I need to talk about this first. I think I already did. Enrollment goal, we talk about the salary increases, the negotiations, the support staff and hiring and retention challenges. Those are all pieces of the staffing challenges that we will be discussing. The building budget allocation, like Patty was saying, is built on the enrollment. And as she was saying, we have had a slight decline in our enrollment over the last few years. So this is going to decrease the building budgets somewhat. We're going to see that happening, and we're also going to, that'll affect staffing as well, the decrease in the enrollment. So since salaries and benefits make up such a big, a little over 80% of our operating budget, of course, salaries is going to be a big part of the budget that we are creating. Right now, we will be in the second year of the PNEA agreement for 24-25, so we know that the increase for those salaries will be 3.97%. The nurses, support staff, and administrators, those are unknown right now. So the other piece of that big chunk is our benefits. That includes our health, dental, vision, and life. These expenses, they didn't increase in 2023, and thankfully they didn't have to increase in 2024 as well. So that is phenomenal. That's a great savings for the district, and it's due to many factors. One is that the plan performs better than other market plans, and another reason is that we have CARE ACT clinics that are always giving us new things. We just had a new location open up on Doherty Ferry, and they are also providing a mental health therapist for us, so they are continuing to help us grow in that area as well. And the district uses CVS for our pharmacy benefit management, and they have helped us reduce the trend. The trend was increasing, and they are helping us control that and get that under control as well. Another thing that we have great here at Parkway is our wellness program. It's phenomenal, and we have education, and we have all kinds of initiatives, and we are always trying to improve those and have other ways of helping the wellness of our staff. Retirement, PSRS, and peers, and taxes, they will increase because salaries will be increasing, but the actual percentages, they do not increase. So that all goes into the calculation for the benefits. This is just a little brag for us, is that the historical trend for our medical PMPM per member per month cost, at a 5-year average, the trend is only 3.5%, and that is phenomenal. And that helps us, you have other funds to meet the other goals of the district, because we have such a phenomenal medical plan. So that's a little brag for us there. So, with all of that being said, those are the pieces that we make the expense. We set the expense ceiling at, for the 24-25 budget, you see there at $270 million. That is a $2.1 million increase from last year, from 23-24 revised budget. So that's how we've set that. That's where we are. And then, do you have any questions about the expense side?
Would you mind repeating that one more time, the increase you were just talking about?
This increase, the 269, the 269,920 million is an increase of 2.1 million from our current 24 revised budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? I'll turn it back over to Patty.
I just want to comment, more of a comment. When I get together with my peers, people talk constantly about the benefit cost increases. And I just want to reinforce, we are so fortunate to have the results we've had the last 5 years, and that it's something that many districts, many organizations really are stressed out about. Patty, that's fair, isn't it? As you talk to your peers.
Oh, absolutely. So, I mean, certainly the addition of the CARE ATC clinics has been amazing. One of our, top 5 expenditures when we review our health trend is wellness. So that's amazing too, with a group our size, to have, right along with neoplasms and back surgeries and everything else, is people going and getting their preventive care. So that is so important. So our award-winning wellness program, we bid out our health and pharmacy, dental, vision every 3 years. So that certainly makes at least assurance that we are getting the market check, that we're getting the best value for our pricing. Dr. Marty was in the room at MSBA when I presented, just simply on, presenting to the board. But one of the slides that we presented was the dollar sign, and we explained a little bit about our benefits with that slide. And there were audible gasps, because we pay not only 100% for the employee, but 50% for family coverage. So, yeah. So that's what part of our 20% is because we do pay for our family we do help supplement the cost of our family members on the plan as well. So that is a great benefit for our employees. And it helps our plan too, because then we have a lot more well people on our plan too. And as John described on this, we utilize where we are with our revenues to draw the line. So Debbie, if you're wondering how did we come up with that amount, it essentially was how do we then have our fund balance either be a surplus or a balance. So we were looking at prior year amounts and next year amounts to kind of make sure that we'll be in balance for both years when we set that balance. So of course that won't be probably our exact balance when we come to you in May. And then putting all of our amounts together, we come up with our operating fund balance. So not only some of our history here, but also where we project to end next year. So that is a slight surplus for next year. So not going to the 0.25%. Right now, we're going to be bringing to you next month or in the next months, because there's a little complications with our fund balance policy. But we're looking at the fund balance policy and knowing that right now we can probably remain and have a stabilization fund balance policy that we've put in place versus our growth policy that has been in place since 2015. So part of the story there, of course, is here's where we predict just on looking at just our 10-year, 11-year history of our fund balance, how far we've come. And that has been tremendous effort, especially, all of our administrators and employees play a part in this. I mean, in our early years in 2014, 15, 16, we didn't have, really high raises for our employees either. So now that we're able to afford more, certainly we have provided more too. I just have some warnings on, what to be cautious on. I know interest rates right now are rather high, but I just had a push-through notification today of 10-year Treasury rates are starting to drop a bit too. So it's an indication that the economy is starting to slow. Pfizer, a great big announcement in the Business Journal today, $3.5 billion in cuts, which includes a lot of jobs here locally, actually in Parkway, because they have not only the science exploratory centers, but then also the office building right there on Olive there. Dr. Marty was just sharing about Missouri revenues not meeting their targets, but the other thing that is triggered with the state of Missouri is a lot of the tax credits were triggered because of the increase in revenues in the previous year. So this will be an interesting year with the Missouri budget and such too, just simply because of all of those tax credits that will play a part in the total revenue collections. And of course, I mentioned it already about our protested taxes. I do believe that we will have a higher volume of taxes paid under protest this year. We know with the newer state statute that it is a 2-year period for those to be settled, so it won't be long and drug out like it was in the Great Recession. So perhaps we'll see a little bit quicker turnaround and such from that too. So just a lot of question marks, but this is the reason that we have healthy balances too, because it helps us to weather some of those storms. Just briefly, capital planning, of course, we still have a little bit to complete on our 2018 bond projects, and of course, we are really doing 2022 in a little bit more full force. You had a breakdown of some of the projects they're working on last month, and we're also working really with our capital projects fund as well. In this evening's budget, you approved a roof repair, and it's almost a replacement at Oak Brook. So we're able to take projects that are really needed, that didn't make the bond list, and take care of them in a timely manner so that we do not have continued longstanding, issues in the building as well. And then we're going to keep exploring the tax credits and energy efficiency as everything comes available. With the growth in the assessed valuation, of course, that helps with our continued health, I'll say, in our debt service fund. Our AAA bond rating, of course, has afforded us lower interest rates. This next year, we will be calculating what's called arbitrage. So we are earning more money on our interest in our capital projects fund than we are paying out in our debt service. So we will be doing that calculation. It's not to be feared. It's just one more calculation, and we'll have to pay a little bit of that interest back, essentially, so taxes on that interest. But it's been decades since we've had to even do that calculation because of the low interest rates on our overnight funds. Any questions?
Well, I'll just say thank you for making it easy to understand. You always do a great job of making really complicated stuff make sense. The only question I have is, in the past few bond issue cycles, we have realized a little extra money toward the end. I know we're early in this process for the current bond, but does it look like we're headed in that same direction?
So first and foremost, our first issuance of bonds, we had a pretty substantial premium, wasn't it 9? Yeah, $8 million. So that alone will help to offset some of the cost increases even that we've seen perhaps with the Early Childhood Center. So we mentioned that we are still spending down the 2018 bond. We are still finalizing some payments and such with McCarthy, finishing out the CMAR project. So with that, we've sat on cash a little bit longer than intended to. So that's why we still have a little bit more funds there to pay out as well. We are identifying doors and different things that can be easily identified, but certainly we're all part of the scope of the 2018 bond issue to finish that out as well. So do we anticipate more? Yes, just simply, the interest alone will be helpful with that.
Patty, I'm interested in that stabilization fund balance policy, because that would be new, right? But would we so could you just, I know it's late, but maybe explain that a little bit. What's the purpose of that policy?
Sure. I'll give you a little snippet. So currently, in our fund balance policy, we actually have language in there that is essentially a mandated growth in our fund balance over each year, and 0.25 each year or 0.75% over a 3-year period. So now that we're at our fund balances that we believe, it's my recommendation that we remain at that fund balance. So instead of our budgets needing to be 0.25% greater in a surplus, they could be balanced and just remain at that same essential fund balance dollar value and or percentage.
And I appreciate that, because it's been always kind of the million-dollar question, if you will.
How far do we go?
How far do
right?
you go? Because now we're up over 40% in a fund balance, and you don't want to cripple the organization by having too much money there when we might need it to flow through. So I appreciate that. And then-
Can I, just a little bit of history. You saw that as we started to do the correction, like in 2012, 13. That board basically said, well, we gotta get moving faster. And the late Chris Jacob was the one who kind of
I was
pushed us.
on that board.
Yeah, you were on that board, and pushed us to
helping
say,
to-
what can we
yes,
do?
putting that
So
further
that's
right.
where we
Right.
added that
No, I
0.25
understand
to enhance it. Like Patty says, we think we're at a point now where we don't need to do that. So, like Patty said, in next month, we'll probably bring you an adjustment to that particular policy.
But
Patty's
my
working.
understanding also with doing that, having a policy like that, it was helpful for our accreditation also, when
Oh, absolutely.
auditors see that. So
Yeah.
that was another benefit to doing
Yeah.
that.
That is absolutely correct. They noted that every time Standard & Poor's reviewed us for our credit rating, they listed that as well. So what makes it complicated is that we are transitioning to MSBA policies. And when we reviewed that policy, was 2020, I believe, was the date on that. We submitted it in 2021 to MSBA, but with it, it combined 8 or 9 policies into it. So we just want to do our due diligence and check all of those before we move to the new policy and delete all the other ones, so. So it's not as easy as we thought it was. I thought it was going to be a slam dunk and done.
Since we're talking a little bit of history here, I mean, Mark Stockwell, Patty's predecessor, I think came to me one of my first years and said, Standard & Poor's was really starting to get concerned about our fund balance and were we going to maintain the
AAA rating.
AAA rating. And I think Mark came down pretty pale saying, oh my God, we can't lose that. So, that was the reason, again, to really think more seriously about raising that fund balance more quickly. That's the policy.
Does Parkway negotiate prescription prices directly with CVS, or does that go through a third party?
We utilize Business Health Coalition, so we're one of
Okay.
several employers in there. So because of the huge buying power, so you Aspire in there and Ameren, and, several large employers are part of that. That buying power, then they essentially do the bidding for the pharmacy benefit managers. And there's 2 options, Express Scripts and CVS. For years, we were with Express Scripts. This last 3 years ago, CVS came in extremely aggressive. We made the move, and we've had very little employee disruption with it as well. So that's been very beneficial to us. So like we say, it broke the trend. We were having 9 and 10% increases just in pharmacy costs alone. And I think we had 2.1% this last year compared to last year. And that's with all of the specialty drugs and the new weight loss drugs and all that are, in the news and headlines. So, I mean, so far it's been successful.
And I only ask because I read that CVS is going to be changing the particular formula that they use to negotiate those prices. So I didn't know if we were going to have to do that or if somebody else's problem is with that, so.
Well, we have that bid coming up this upcoming year, so perhaps.
That the CVS is changing how they're doing their formula for coming up with prescriptions prices, so I don't know if it's in a good way or a bad way, didn't go that deep to it, but just it's changing, and because they are one of the most competitive, low-cost
Well,
pharmacies,
and
so.
there's a lot of pending legislation where, of course, pharmacy companies have a presence with our federal legislators as well, and they'd like to, get rid of all of the rebate programs and such too, and have a little bit more price control. So more to come on that. We don't know where that's all gonna end up. But, we as Americans pay a lot more for the same drug versus in other countries. And part of that is we pay for all that R&D expense here and such. So that is kind of just part of our setup. But the good thing is we will be bidding this out again in the spring. So with their new pricing, they'd have to submit that for, that bidding process.
Okay, great, thank you.
Any questions? Any others?
Just to kind of put a cap on this, budget assumptions is what I think we'd say this year, there's probably a bit more unsureness than perhaps the last couple of years. Would that be fair, Patty?
There is.
Yeah. Again, I heard about, the Missouri revenue and then just the economy issues.
Well, you have the slowing of the economy. The last couple of years, we've had, you know, the inflation that is, you know, skyrocketing, and hadn't been that high inflation in decades either. So now you have the slowing of the economy from that. So you have some layoffs with, you know, major employers and such. Of course, we'll gladly take those laid off employees. We have plenty of job openings and such. So we're not to the part where, you know, we need to be panicked by any way or mean. It just needs to be cautious as we move into the future as well.
And from our previous discussion, I think we say this every year. I know Patty's dead set on this. I mean, we are not going to deficit spend. Because you saw when we did that, you know, prior in the Great Recession, what that did to us. And so we will bring you a balanced budget. That's our commitment. And we've said that every year when we've had this meeting in December. I think that's our goal, even though we have a lot of needs. You know, it's tempting to say we have to take care of all the things that we just talked about in the previous presentation, plus all those other things, but we cannot deficit spend.
It's about setting priorities and, well, thank you all for your time. That felt really good. That's my last budget assumption presentation.
Great as always.
Good job.
You're gonna miss
Dawn,
this.
thank you.
All right, may I have a motion and a second to adjourn the regular meeting?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. Thank you all for
Your attendance and watching remotely.